Five Nights at Freddy's is commonly referred to as one of the standout modern horror films, due to its much-loved IP causing horror beyond belief. So, without further ado, allow me to give you a full rundown of the film and review its core components. But before I do so, if you could take a moment to subscribe to my channel, that would be very much appreciated. Now let's begin. The horror of Five Nights at Freddy's begins not in a haunted house or cursed graveyard, but in the bruised and weary life of its protagonist, Mike Schmidt, a struggling young man with a troubled past, a fractured family, and no real future ahead of him. Mike is introduced as someone constantly teetering on the brink, recently fired from his job as a mall security guard after a violent altercation, and now facing the grim possibility of losing custody of his younger sister Abby to their estranged aunt. It's a bleak setup, one that feels all too familiar, yet this ordinary desperation is the engine that drives Mike into one of the most terrifying experiences of his life, a deadly few nights inside the shuttered remains of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, a long-abandoned family entertainment restaurant with a dark and bloody past. Our story opens with Mike's aimless drift through life. He's a man who has burned every bridge, yet must somehow find a way to keep his fragile family intact. Social services are breathing down his neck, threatening to take Abby away unless he can prove that he's capable of caring for her. Enter Steve Raglan, a seemingly helpful though cryptic career counselor who offers Mike an unusual night job, a security guard for Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The restaurant, long closed and rife with rumors, is said to be safe, at least according to Steve, but something about the way he presents the offer feels unsettling. Still, Mike has few options left and reluctantly accepts. From the moment Mike sets foot inside Freddy Fazbear's, there's a palpable sense that this place is far from abandoned. The decor is faded, the animatronic mascots, including Freddy, Bunny, Chica, and Foxy, are ever so oddly cheerful, and then there's Mr. Cupcake, who's lurking in the shadows, staring without blinking. Yet it's the silence that truly unnerves. A sterile, watchful stillness that seems pregnant with something unseen. Mike's first night on the job begins with mundane tasks, monitoring security cameras, checking doors, surviving the groans of an old building, but it doesn't take too long for the creeping dread to settle into his bones. As the night progresses, what initially feels like an eerie but straightforward haunting begins to spiral into something much darker. Mike soon learns that the animatronics aren't malfunctioning robots, they're possessed by restless, vengeful spirits, the souls of the children who went missing from a pizzeria decades earlier. The legend of Freddy Fazbear is whispered through the local lore and urban legend, but as the clock ticks towards midnight on Mike's shift, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. These aren't just haunted machines, they're vessels of pain, memory, and unfinished business. The terror escalates when Mike's younger sister, Abby, becomes unknowingly entangled in the mystery. Initially kept away from Freddy Fazbear's by Mike's instinctive protectiveness, Abby's presence becomes inevitable after the disappearance of Max, her babysitter, and one of her vandals hired by their aunt to sabotage Mike's job. When Mike returns to the pizzeria with Abby, he attempts to keep her close, but the supernatural element continues to spread like that of a fever. The animatronics, rather than attacking outright, display an unsettling affection toward Abby, sensing something different from her. They seem to want her not as prey, but as one of their own, a chilling twist that blurs the lines between threat and fragile spectral longing. The figure who looms largest over their unfolding nightmare is Vanessa Shelley, a police officer with knowledge she shares cautiously. Vanessa approaches Mike with cryptic warnings about Freddy's and the horrors that occurred there, laying bare some fragments of history. The restaurant's closure after unexplained disappearances in the 1980s and the eerie, almost supernatural behavior of the animatronics. Vanessa's presence is enigmatic. She oscillates between unsettling calm and barely contained dread, like someone who has seen too much but refuses to leave the darkness behind. One of the most disturbing layers of Freddy's history, and a key emotional driver of Mike's journey, is a memory of his missing younger brother, Garrett. Plagued by recurring dreams of Garrett's disappearance, Mike's psyche begins to unravel as he confronts both his guilt and grief. These dreams aren't simple hallucinations, they function as psychological breadcrumbs, drawing Mike deeper into the truth about the pizzeria and the spirits that inhabit it. The missing brother becomes more than a personal tragedy. He becomes a mirror of a larger unresolved trauma at Freddy's, where the boundary between the living and the dead corrodes under the weight of secrets and loss. At its core, Five Nights at Freddy's is not just a haunted attraction movie, it's an exploration of unresolved human trauma and the desperate lengths we go to protect those that we love. Mike's fear of losing Abby becomes intertwined with his fear of confronting his own past, and as the supernatural threat intensifies, so does the emotional resonance of his journey. The animatronics, possessed by the souls of the children, aren't faceless monsters. They're tragic echoes of forgotten victims, their intentions blurred by decades of neglect and rage. The narrative peaks in a series of increasingly horrifying confrontations. Mike, Vanessa, and Abby find themselves trapped inside Freddy's as the night's dangers multiply. The animatronics' hostility grows more vicious and coordinated, forcing them to evade pursuit and uncover hidden truths. It's during these moments that the film deftly blends psychological horror with physical peril. The terror lies not just in what might jump out from the shadows, but in the ever-intensifying emotional stakes binding the characters together. The culmination of this tension is a revelation that reframes everything we've seen. Behind the facade of animatronics' malevolence is an even darker puppeteer, William Afton, the very man who betrayed the trust and innocence of children years before. In a chilling twist, Afton reveals himself to be none other than Steve Raglan, the career counselor who first lured Mike into the job that led him into Freddy's. This revelation reshapes Afton from a shadowy spectre into a heinous villain, the architect of a pizzeria's nightmares, the one responsible for the unspeakable murders that birthed the vengeful spirits now inhabiting the animatronics. Afton's calm demeanor throughout the film is revealed to be a mask, a carefully constructed facade designed to manipulate and control. Afton's revelation hits hardest because it connects the supernatural horror with a deeply human betrayal. He isn't just a ghost or a force of nature, he's a man who made choices, gruesome ones, and the rage of his spirits is as much about justice as it is about freedom. When Afton reactivates the animatronics and turns them against Mike and Abby, the stakes sharpen. These forces are no longer unpredictable apparitions, but instruments of a tormentor trying to perpetrate his region of terror. Mike's confrontation with Afton and the animatronics reaches its apex in an emotional and brutal spectacle with Vanessa by his side, though gravely injured after being stabbed by Afton. Mike fights not just for survival, but for a return of emotional agency. Faced with the crushing weight of his own grief and the potential loss of Abby, Mike is forced to confront what has driven him into Freddy's in the first place. The self-destructive obsession with rescuing what he has lost rather than protecting what remains. In one of the most affecting sequences of the film, Abby's quiet strength becomes the turning point. Despite her youth and vulnerability, she draws on a power unique to her, her innocence and clarity of perception. Through her drawings, Abby reveals the true face of the horror. She depicts Afton as a yellow rabbit, the embodiment of deception and murder that has haunted the pizzeria's legacy. This act of creative truth-telling breaks the spell. The animatronics, confronted with the reality of their own past and the face of their tormentor, turn against Afton in a chilling echo of the game's lore. The spring-locked mechanisms inside Afton's unsuit activate, trapping him in a metal prison he once used to lure and kill children. The animatronics drag the wounded Afton away, and in that moment, the horror that has defined Freddy's is confronted head-on. Mike and Abby, battered but alive, carry Vanessa, whose fate hangs in the balance, out of a collapsing pizzeria. This climax is both a release and a reminder. The ghosts are freed from their tormentor's control, but the scars they carry will never fully fade. The film's final moments are ambiguous and haunting. Vanessa survives her injuries but remains in a hospital coma, a testament to the cost of confronting such horror. Abby and Mike return to their ordinary lives, changed by their experiences. The bond between brother and sister is stronger, but now tinged with the memory of what they witnessed and their souls had encountered. Back at Freddy's, the animatronic spirits watch from the shadows, free from Afton's control, yet still present, suggesting that the story isn't truly over. Just as Afton once warned, some spirits never fully leave, and some horrors remain waiting for another night. Now that the summary is out of the way, I'll go over what I liked about Five Nights at Freddy's and what didn't sit so well for me. One of the biggest strengths of the movie is how it takes a familiar horror setup, an abandoned child entertainment center, and twists it into something far more psychological and character driven. Most horror films give you jump scares early on and rely on them throughout. But here, the tension is meticulously built. The animatronics aren't just scary, they're sad, vengeful, and tied to a much deeper history that you slowly uncover. I particularly liked how the film humanizes the spirits inhabiting Freddy and his companions. It adds a layer of tragedy to the horror that makes the scares resonate on a more emotional level. Now for what didn't work as well. The pacing is uneven at times. While the tension builds impressively over the first couple of nights, there are moments in the middle where the narrative feels bogged down by repeated sequences of Mike checking cameras, doors, and hallways. It creates kind of a monotony that slowly undermines the otherwise relentless dread. Another issue is the underdevelopment of some supporting characters, particularly Vanessa. She's intriguing and mysterious, but her motivations and backstory are barely explored behind what's necessary to propel the plot. For a character who plays a pivotal role in guiding Mike and revealing Afton's history, I felt she could have more substance and agency. Finally, the ending, while thrilling and emotionally resonant, leaves a lot of ambiguity. Some viewers may find the open-ended nature, with the animatronics free but still watching, and Vanessa's fate uncertain, frustrating. It's effective in keeping the horror alive, but it might not satisfy those for a clear resolution. And with all that said, The film does a fantastic job of honoring the original source material and deserves a 4 out of 10. And with that, I hope you all have a good night.